Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome to this session on measuring sustainability in research through the SDGs. We'll have the pleasure of welcoming Elsevier in a minute. This event is hosted by ISCN, the International Sustainable Campus Network, and has been prepared in very close collaboration with the CESA network, the network of universities of science and technology in Europe. This event will be recorded. So if you have any friends, colleagues who could not attend the event today, a video will be available on ISCN website. My name is Alexander. I work as an institutional data manager at EPFL in Switzerland, and I will be one of you two moderators today, together with Christina from KTH. Christina.
Hi everyone, so nice to see you all. My name is Christina van Oudreich, and I'm working as the Sustainability Manager at KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, Sweden. Thank you.
So for those of you who have followed our work for the past 12 months, you'll recognize this slide. We haven't changed it for the past 5 sessions. A few reminders on how Zoom works. This is not a Zoom conference, it's a Zoom webinar, so you won't be able to ask the questions orally. Please, for that, use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and please vote for the questions that you think are relevant, so that will help us prioritize the questions as they come through. We also advise you to use the side-by-side mode, which will make the event more enjoyable. You'll be able to enjoy the presentation, the questions, and our faces at the same time. We'll take a few minutes now just to take a look at the agenda. After the welcome and the meeting procedures, we'll have the pleasure of welcoming M'hamed el Aisati from Elsevier, who will be running a presentation of his work for 30 minutes. Then we'll jump in the Q&A sessions, which will be split into 2 parts. We have collected a few questions from you before the event, so we'll take those questions, 10 questions. This will be the backbone of the Q&A session, and then of course we'll take all the live questions that you'll address in the Q&A box. We have dedicated 40 minutes for that. This is generous, but we wanted to make sure that we have enough time to take all the questions and answer them thoroughly. If there are no more questions, we can end the event also a little ahead of time. And then Christina will wrap up and conclude. Before I introduce you to M'hamed, let me take a step back on why we're here. Some of you may recall that last year, at the end of June, we organized a 2-hour session in the frame of the ISCN conference with the topic, THE Impact Ranking. Can this ranking act as a catalyzer towards more sustainability in universities? And this led to very interesting debates and a follow-up session, two follow-up sessions of this first conference was a meeting with THE and a meeting with QS. And one word kept coming, Elsevier. THE bases itself on Elsevier for all its bibliometric work that is being used in its ranking, and QS plans to do the same when they will launch their first step in including sustainability in their rankings. So we thought it would be kind of a nice follow-up of the follow-ups to have a discussion today with M'hamed, and so we're really thrilled, and this is a bit how the story unfolded itself, and this is the natural follow-up of the work we've been conducting. So I'm very thrilled to introduce you to M'hamed el Aisati, who's VP of Product and Management, Funding and Content Analytics at Elsevier. M'hamed holds a master's degree in computer science, and when we prepared this session together with M'hamed, I recall that he's been working for more than 22 years at Elsevier, so he knows the house very well, and he was one of the key players in creating Scopus, and now he heads a big team of data scientists in the Netherlands. So M'hamed, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being with us. I'll unshare my screen. I'll let you jump in and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. And thanks for the kind words. Let me actually share my screen. And go to presentation mode. Please confirm that you can see my screen.
We can see your screen now, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Christina, for this chance. I am genuinely really thrilled to be here because we always seek also to engage with the stakeholders in the research community, particularly people from universities, are very important for us, for our business, for our engagements. So this is a good chance. Actually, if I knew this, Alex, I would have reached out myself to you before because we work with THE and with QS and many other ranking providers by supplying to them indeed the bibliometric data, but also engage with them in consultative mode, if you like, in determining what indicators make sense, which do not make sense, how many should be included, what are the caveats, and how do we position a responsible use of these metrics? Because the reality is just a lens of what you are seeing. It does not give you the entire picture, and we have to be careful when we look at these things. So I prepared some slides. I know Alex and Christina, you put 30 minutes for this. I hope I can keep it to 30 minutes, but there is so much information that I am trying to be as transparent and as frank, as open as possible. So I will share as much as possible. It is not meant to be a brain dump or a dump just on you guys and you just consume that information. I think we have, if there are burning questions, you don't need to wait necessarily until the end to start putting in questions. You can do them as we do. We will obviously come back to these questions that are in the Q&A box. I also received, thanks to Alex and Christina, some questions that were collected ahead of time or ahead of today, and I also have some answers for those. So with that, I'm not going to spend time talking about myself because I think Alex did a good job there. All I want to say, though, is that I'm very much into this space. Some of you, if you attend the ranking summits, whether QS or THE, might have seen me because I do present a lot. In fact, before the pandemics, I used pretty much to be always there with Duncan Ross and Phil Beatty and Ben Salter on the other side for QS. So I don't know, I mean, I don't know the names, but if there are any follow-up, either directly or through Alex and Christina, I'm more than happy to follow up on anything that we might not have the chance to discuss today, or you didn't get a chance to ask about that. All right, so let's jump in. The first thing I thought I'm going to make very clear, because it might not be very relevant or not clear and not apparent to a lot of people in the research community. ELSEVIER is part of RELX. I think most of people probably know that. So RELX is the mother company and has more than ELSEVIER. So ELSEVIER is the so-called science, technical, and medicine business side or side of the business. We have also a sister company called LexisNexis. We have what we call exhibitions, and we have also something called about the risk business. I just want to say that the mother company and to which ELSEVIER belongs, the SDGs is a big topic. I mean, this is not a marketing blurb, trust me. This is not just a story that I'm pushing here just to show maybe how great we are, wherever. It is an important thing. This is actually a website. Anyone can go there. I included the link there on purpose so you can see exactly what we are doing. There's a lot of information there. There's a lot to download. There's a lot to question, to challenge if you want to. But I just wanted to emphasize the importance of the SDGs topic at the RELX level, at the CEO level. As you can see, I deliberately included this quote from our CEO, Eric Engström, about the relevance of SDGs for our business, as he clearly says there. And we put this resource center, as we call it, to really help the researchers and the public by giving them access to critical content and understanding about what the SDGs, what ELSEVIER is doing there, including when the pandemic started last year, where we made a lot of information available for the community to help address the issue there. So a big important topic for us. For various reasons. To the point, I can tell you this, to the point that in our own, let's say, performance objective at individual level, we do include these matters of inclusion and diversity, including the SDGs. And that's thanks for our new CEO, Kumsal Bayezid. She's a female, which is actually a great thing in terms of inclusion. She started as a CEO a year and a half ago, and she is actually championing the SDGs a lot together with inclusion and diversity topics. All right, so just like a scene setting, just for you guys to understand how this topic is really important for us. Now, I thought I'm going to talk about Scopus, and just to manage again the expectation, I'm not here necessarily pitching how great Scopus, what that is. It's not the point. The point is that it's the foundation about the queries, which is the approach we are doing, and a lot of questions are coming that. So it's a piece that we cannot get around it. It's really all at the end of the day about Scopus and how this information is exhibited in Scopus and is syndicated, if you like, through SciVal, and how it's used in the impact rankings as well, which is at the moment only THE has that, but as Alex said, QS is also planning to use our work that we are doing, the SDGs, for their own impact ranking version, if you like. Okay, the first thing I wanted to tell you is, because there are a lot of metrics that I'm going to show to you later on, and I just want to give you like a sense of what we are doing at the company in terms of creating the foundation, which is the data, and then do this entity resolution, if you like. So we can identify people from strings of text, organizations, assertions in the articles, a lot of things. So what we are trying to do is, and within Elsevier, we have a lot of, as you know, some businesses. So for example, if you look at the piece in red at the top, this is really our Scopus Science Direct, which is our full text platform, which accounts for 60 to 17% of all publishers in the market. We have access to patent data, we have access to preprints, to clinical trials. We have obviously funding data. We do a lot of things with the usage, the traffic that is coming to our platforms. And you will see there's a question about the views and downloads, so we'll come to that later. We try, obviously, ultimately, we are trying to create these entities, if you like, and try to link them, because you can have data, but if the data is not linked, the value, the potential of the value is not surfacing at the top. So we do a lot of work in that. We have actually a whole army of data scientists beyond just my team. I have just 30 people in my team, and I think we have hundreds of data scientists at Elsevier across the different business, whether it's in the health business or in the so-called STM business. And what we try to do, again, is to mine that data to identify the entities in the data and try to link them, which allows us to do a lot of things, among other things, roll up the numbers so that we can provide indicators for individual researchers, for journals, for institutions, for research groups, for countries, you name it, all these things, which also allows us, obviously, to potentially help THE with the indicators that we are providing at institutional level. Okay, so again, I'm not going to spend too much about this. I think I just said this, right? So what we're trying to do is basically take all these things and roll them up to come up with this type of indicators that you can see here. So we can view the ranking, as I mentioned. We can do things at article level. We have our own site score, which is like a journal impact factor, if you like. Citations, downloads. We can even do things about migration of researchers, so we can track researchers as they move from one affiliation to another, whether it's an academic affiliation or a company or an industry or nonprofit, whatever you have. So this is just to give you an idea that a lot of work is going into the plumbing. You can call this plumbing work, really, just to make sure that we have a good foundation that gives us data at scale. The word scale is very important here, because if you have little data and you do all these very fantastic things, the numbers could be misleading and you have to be careful. And I think this is one of the things about the methodology used by the ranking providers that a lot of people in the research community questioning. Just to give an example, and this is not to put anybody on the spot or in a bad light, but for a university, for example, to participate in the World University Ranking at THE, all you require is 1,000 papers. And when it comes to comparing a university that just produced 1,000 papers with a university that produced 50,000 papers, obviously you can put some questions about whether it's fair. But that's another topic. It's not for today. I'm not going to spend too much time again on Scopus because I assume a lot of people know Scopus. So we have 81 million. I just checked this yesterday on the database as we speak. More than 70,000 affiliation or organization profiles, academic, non-academic, as I said, institution, hospitals, you name it. And we have profiles for 16 million researchers or authors, not only the active ones, obviously, because I believe around active ones should be in the order of 10 to 11 million. Okay, so the model that we are using in Scopus is always this triangle between article, paper, and affiliation. The reason I'm showing this to you, again, is not to market Scopus necessarily, but just to tell you about what makes us or what puts us in the position to produce these indicators at these various levels, right? So it all starts bottom up at the article level, and it goes to researcher level, and it goes to affiliation level, and it goes to country level. And then you can obviously do things at discipline level, you name it. So that we can all do these kind of things. A lot of this information, by the way, is available. It's publicly available anyway, so nothing shocking here. I think you guys know this. So we have a lot of journals in different subject disciplines. We have conferences, we have books. One of the reasons actually I've shown this slide only just because to say when it comes to rankings, we use specific document types, as we call them. So in Scopus, you can find more than 15 document types, all the way from article reviews, conference papers, books, chapters, letters, short surveys, technical reports, notes, you name it. So the 5 that really matter is the ones that I just mentioned: article, reviews, conference papers, books, and book chapters. And why those 5 specifically? Because if you look at the total number of papers that are in Scopus in particular, you will find that these 5 capture pretty much 90 to 95% of all the papers in there anyway. And it's also the type of document that contain the actual substance of research. Now, let's get into the actually, maybe it was a bit too long preamble, but let's get there to what really matters in today's session, which is really about these SDGs. So, and I'll tell you in a minute how this started, but ultimately the way we are doing this is that we have 17 SDGs, but the 17th, as you guys all know, it's about collaboration on the 16th. So when it comes, it's really about determining the queries for the 16. And it's currently based on queries. And I'll tell you in a minute how we came to where we are and what are the plans obviously for the future. But it's really based on queries. Now I'm showing you a screenshot on the right on scopus.com, where you put the query and we search in the title, abstract, and keyword. There was a question, where are you doing these searches? So there is the answer. We use the title, abstract, and keywords. Scopus, as you guys know, is an ANI database that it's called. ANI stands for abstract and indexing. It does not include full text. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a database that contains data from more than 5,000 publishers, of which Elsevier is just one. Yes, we do cover 16 to 17%, as I mentioned, in terms of market. So our share in the market is 16 to 17%. But there are obviously the Wileys, the Nature Springer, there are many other publishers out there. The full text, we do not index it for searches. That's not part of the agreement that we have with these publishers. We do index a lot of fields: abstract, keywords, titles, references. You know, when it comes to mesh terms, for example, in the typical biomedical sector. Obviously journal names, it's a bunch of things we index. But for the searches specific for the SDGs, when you want to identify all the publications in Scopus that are in a specific SDG, it's a query based, and it's, you know, we search for specific fields. In this case, by the way, the title, abstract, and keyword is what we call a composite field. So it's not, you are not searching in title or abstract or keyword. I don't want to get into the SEO. I don't want to make this too technical, but feel free to ask a question. But basically, you take these 2-3 fields, you create a so-called composite field in the search engine, and that helps you actually conduct that search at once. The number that you see there, which is just a screenshot that's saying 72,483 documents, that's for a specific period of time. So in this case, it's really about 5 years, which is the typical 5-year window that we are using when we determine the indicators that we share with Times Higher Education for their impact ranking. All right, so let's just move on. By the way, I should say also the queries that we are using are publicly available, and they are on Mendeley, which I assume you guys know Mendeley. It's this social network for scientists, or a reference tool, a reference management tool. We have there something called data.mendeley.com. If you use this link, you will be able to download all these queries. So they are available for you. Again, maybe I'm stating the obvious. Maybe you guys already know this, but just in case, you can go and retrieve them. They are in PDFs. And you will see all the queries that we have there. The queries that you will be able to download are the ones that are in use as we speak right now. Because I will share later with you the plans as of March, April, mostly April, which means that those will not necessarily on Mendeley unless we update them, which probably will have to. But I just wanted to make sure that you guys get the picture. All right, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about history, but just in case you are interested, again, it all started back in 2018. At the time, Duncan Ross and I don't know where we were, but certainly not in Europe. I think we were somewhere in APAC. And we had this discussion of idea about creating some sort of an impact ranking. And in the lack of something better that helps the community measure societal impact, because that's the holy grail, really. I mean, everybody in the research community is trying to find a way or ways to measure societal impact. In other words, the contribution of research, I'm talking about research, not education for the moment, but the impact of research on society, on humankind. Are we making the world greener? Are we addressing climate change things? You know, there is not a framework that has been figured out. That's why I call it the holy grail. Who knows, maybe in 5 years, 10 years from now, we will find a way, but it doesn't exist for the time being. So SDGs have been used as a proxy so far, just to get us closer to what really the impact is. Anyway, back in that time, Duncan and I were discussing, and the idea then was to create such an impact based on SDGs. And I think THE had the plan to only use 11 SDGs, of which 17 is one of the 11. Later on, it evolved to include all 16, plus the 17th, of course. The first ranking was released, I believe it was with KAIST, with the Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology in Korea in April 2019. And then, you know, we started obviously improving these queries. We went in September to 16. We used them for the first time in SciVal in October 2020. In April, a formal discussion started with Aurora. I have to say that our engagement with Aurora was earlier than that, I have to say, because the good news is I'm based in Amsterdam. My team, most of them are in Amsterdam. So we could just take the metro with 15 minutes to go to the Vrije Universiteit, the Free University here, which is on a place called the Zuidas, the south of Amsterdam. Our office is based in the west side, northwest. Anyway, it was close, so we went there a couple of times to discuss with them how we can work together. And since then, we've been engaging with them quite a lot. I'll talk about the collaboration model later on the presentation. So we started again working with them. We improved some of the queries. Last year, we started actually collecting feedback more and more on what we call papered links. So again, we will get into the details there, but that's where we really started having some kind of feedback loop, if you like. So whatever we improve, we share it, we get feedback, and we look back, etc., etc. But again, until now, it's really query-based and query-based only. We have some plans to release something in April 2021. Again, I'll talk to that later on. You can see there the abbreviation ML. So we are thinking, or we have actually developed something that takes the queries as the base model, and we add some machine learning to improve the overall results. And I'll tell you all the details in a minute. Just bear with me. This is just a screenshot to give you an idea about how SDGs are included in SciVal. Not sure how many of you have SciVal, but for those who have it, this should be familiar. You can see on the left side, the highlighted box there. You can see all the SDGs. And in this particular example, we are looking at no poverty, the first, and you can see all the things you could do with it. At the end of the day, remember, SDGs is, this linking of papers to SDGs, which is the core of the discussion we are having, is nothing else than classifying content. I call it a classifier. It's not about metrics or indicators, because those are agnostic to any classification. Of course, you have to select the right ones, but technically speaking, it's a classifier. And once you do the classification itself, you can do this kind of things. You can look at the volume, like the scholarly output. You can look at this academic citation impact, if you like, the one we are using called FWCI, or field-weighted citation impact. You can look at international collaboration, the views that we'll be using, also citation counts, etc. So you can do a lot of things there. Now let's talk about this document linking a little bit more in details. There was a couple of questions about the collaboration that we have been having so far. So the idea, of course, is to have a fair, inclusive, and comprehensive methodology to make sure that for each SDG, we have a comprehensive set of papers that belong to the SDG, meaning we do not leave out much, because again, perfection doesn't exist in this world. This is not an exact science. But if you leave, for whatever reason, some papers outside that mix, you want to minimize that. You want to make this kind of error margin as acceptable as possible. At the same time, whatever you do partition as part of SDG 1 or 2, whatever, you do want to make sure that they are accurate. In other words, you don't want to create noise by just saying, you know, I believe you have 1,000 papers in SDG 1, but when you check them, you find half of them not belonging to that SDG. So that's the challenge. And of course, with queries, they have their limitations. That's just the reality, and we have to accept that. So part of the work we've been trying to do is, you can see 3 universities here. Again, the SDU is the South of Denmark University, from Denmark, obviously. Vrije Universiteit here in the Netherlands, I mentioned, and the University of Auckland in New Zealand. With these 3, we are having a lot of engagement directly. Actually, the few was speaking, as far as I hope I'm not saying something stupid here or something wrong, but I think they were speaking on behalf of Aurora when they talked to us. So we have a collaboration with these 3 where we are sharing some data back and forth with them. There was a question later on, and we will get to the question, are we interested in having more? By all means. Seriously, I mean, we do need this engagement. And because SDG is a public matter thing, I think anything else should not matter. What matters is really, how do we do this and do this properly? So the challenge that we have, obviously, is when you look at the SDGs and look at the research output, the distance between the output and all the way to the SDGs is quite far. That's why I'm using this word upstream. Let me explain that a little bit more. So if you look at this picture here, which is just try to give this the notion of you know, this idea of research is done there. There are a bunch of things in that triggers maybe new tools, new policies, new changes. A bunch of things could be triggered by research and research output. However, when it takes quite a while to get the actual targets that form a specific SDG. Like in this example, if you look at number 14, which is the life below water, and all the targets, we need to figure out how do we get from that part on the left side all the way to the right side, and we want to make sure that everything in the target, or all the targets, are properly covered by this methodology. So I spoke about the feedback, and I just want to say that as of last year, we started collecting the feedback, as I mentioned. We have something you can see you can see the URL. I mean, I can click, but then I have to leave and delete the presentation. But just trust me. I mean, I'm not sure whether we'll be sharing the slides afterwards. I think I'm happy to do that, to be honest. That's fine. You can use that link to go to the RELEX website, where we have these SDG resources that I talked about earlier. And we've done a pilot on number 6, on SDG 6, where we were actually asking people to tell us whether the papers that you see on the right side. So I took this screenshot where you can see the papers that that are belonging to that SDG, and people could just tell us, yeah, we believe it's, you can see the feedback there, so you can basically click on the feedback and provide us some feedback. So we are open to the public there anyway, so anybody can give us that feedback beyond, again, this very tight collaboration that we have currently with the 3 universities that I just mentioned. We have also subject matter experts in-house, just by the way, because at the end of the day, we remain a publisher as well. So we are not just an information analytics company. I don't sit in the publishing business, at least, well, they are my colleagues. And when we used to go in the office, obviously I'm calling in from home now, but when you used to go in the office, they were sitting 1 floor above me. But the reality is I don't sit in publishing, in the publishing units, what we call STMJ, which is the STM journals. But we have a lot of subject matter experts there as well with an academic background who are also giving us feedback internally. But of course, we want to go as global as possible across all the 16 SDGs as possible as well. I did not show the actual queries themselves, but I don't know whether we want to get into the discussion. Maybe we want to go in the Q&A, but again, they are available. You can download them from Mendeley. It's not a public, it's not a secret. It's a public thing available anyways. Let me show you something, how they look like in SciVal. And again, I'm trying to be as careful as possible, so not to give you the impression that I'm trying to push any product or do any marketing, but this is mostly to show you how things look like in action when things are implemented, which again, might raise some questions and may trigger some challenges from you guys. So this is the public open pages on SciVal, on SciVal.com. So if you go to SciVal.com/SDGs, you don't need to be a subscriber to SciVal to see these pages here. So you can see the plans, what we are doing, and you can see the link to download things from Mendeley here, for example. So a bunch of things you can read there. This is still from the same page. So for example, if you look at one, this is just an example on SDG 4, which is the quality education. You can see, for example, this fingerprint, as I call it myself, or the word cloud, as you can see it here, which typically tells you about the keywords that were used actually to come up with that set of publications. In this case, the 30,959, which is not surprising, to be honest with you, because quality education as a topic or as a discipline, when it comes to an international database like Scopus, is always quite interesting, because it's a social science discipline, which, as we all know, is a bit tougher than when it comes to exact science like physical sciences or life sciences. What you also can see there already some things we share, availably for public. So you can see, for example, the clusters, as we call them topics, the topic cluster. So what are the topics within that SDG? How many papers, how many papers per these topics? And what is the field-weighted citation impact for each of this topic? We have something called topics of prominence. I could dive into this, but I'm afraid that we will diverge from this discussion because it will take us in a complete different thing. But topics of prominence is basically a way to classify research in very niche disciplines based on citations, based on site score, and based on views. So it's a combination of a bunch of metrics that allows us to classify content in very niche areas. And prominence meaning how prominent it is today. It's not how much cited, how prominent, meaning how much it's emerging in the research that is taking place today. Let me just move on. Other things you can see there is these typical things in terms of time series, a number of papers that you can see. Again, everyone knows that 21 is not complete. In fact, even 2020 is not complete as we speak. That's why you see the numbers going down. But again, you can see some simple comparison about which universities are most productive in this specific SDG. And here, which countries are most productive or most active, as we call it here on the slide. All this information, again, you do not need to be a subscriber of SciVal. You can just go and find it there. However, now it comes, if you want to get more analysis, you want to click on Analyze More in Details. That's where you, unfortunately, I say unfortunately because I know that people prefer things for free, of course, but then you will need to have access to SciVal, where you can do a lot of analysis for your university, to compare universities with your peers, countries. You can see the top authors, you can see some key phrases, you can see things on the trends, you can do a lot of things in there. But again, just to manage expectation, this does require a SciVal subscription. All right, let me just, I don't know whether you want to see this. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I was saying. You know, you can still look into institutions and do some benchmarking. In this case, for example, Monash, which is the top one. So what do you see more about Monash? You can see the overall papers, the citation counts, the authors. You can basically deep dive in this particular area. I should say, by the way, here, not just people starting thinking Monash is really #1 in the world. Keep in mind, we are only showing here one particular region of the world, which is Asia Pacific. So I don't want to be misleading anyone. This is the last section, Alex and Christina. I know that it's taken a bit longer, but then we can go to the questions, and hopefully this is all useful. But again, if not, hopefully we have the question and answers that might add to things that I did not touch on. And again, I'll be more than happy to answer any question. I wanted to talk about THE in particular, because obviously we are doing this with THE. And some of the questions were related to metrics that we do provide to THE. Now, I wonder whether I should actually dive too much in the methodology of the rankings, because the reality is this: we as Elsevier do not own the methodology. It's ultimately owned by THE. We do give them consultancy, as I said, we do advise, we do experiment and pilot things with them before we launch anything together or in partnership, but ultimately they remain the owners of the methodology. And this is not just a hide. I mean, listen, I can answer anything, even on their behalf. Our relationship with them is just fantastic, so it's not a problem. But I just want to make sure that people understand where the ownership sits. Now, you know this, right? So there are 17 used as one to come up with one overall score. It's based on each SDG metrics. We have a bunch of metrics. Some are included in some SDGs, some are not included in these SDGs. Overall, our contribution, if you like, is 27%. You will see what that number means. That's the weight that is given to the metrics that we are providing to THE out of the 100. Remember that the methodology, which you can find freely and available on their website, comprises 4 components. I believe it's research, if I'm not mistaken. So research, stewardship, outreach, and education. And we only contribute to the research part. And I believe that part is 27%. There is an overall score which is based on institutions' activity on SDG 17, plus the top 3 SDGs based on the score of the university in each of the SDGs that they are participating in. And the participation, as you guys also know, is based on your data that you provide to THE. So I apologize if I'm repeating the story that you guys all know, but I just thought if there are people who are not aware, they might benefit from this. If you look, for example, what provided for the impact ranking of last year, which they call impact ranking 2020, it's based on the publication window 2014-2018. In case you wonder why not 2019, because by the time that we give them the metrics, which is typically February of each year, so around this time, we are providing them the data for the impact ranking that will be launched in 2 months from now. I believe it's virtual this time. Last year it was supposed to be Sweden, but it went virtual because of the pandemic. This year is going to be virtual again. So a publication year, as most of you probably know, is only coming to a completion by May timeframe. So 2020 as a publication year is only complete May this year. So we cannot include 2020 in the data that we provide to them. So we provide to them this time around 15 to 19. What I'm sharing with you was based on the previous year, which was 14, 18. I hope you guys follow. If I'm confusing you, I apologize, but happy to follow up on that as well. When it comes to citations, we take them all the way from 2014 to 2020. In other words, a paper published in 2014, we get the citation given to that paper all the way until we make a cut to the snapshot, which is February 2020. That's exactly what you see here. We do not include what we call suspended journals. So Scopus has a policy that if we see some odd activity, the so-called predatory journals, if we see some non-ethical activity on journals, I get too many self-citations or a fluctuation of the volume or something like that, we do suspend titles. We do suspend these journals, meaning that we do not remove the previously added articles, but we stop adding new articles. For THE, we do not include suspended journals altogether. I mentioned the five publication types, the articles, review, and all that stuff. So I think I mentioned it before. And again, the queries, as I mentioned, they are available. They are open to the public. These are the metrics. I'm not going to go through each one of them because the next slide will tell you how they are distributed per SDG. So let me just go there. These are obviously the 17 SDGs. These are the metrics that you just saw in the previous slides, or the indicators. And again, I don't think we have the time to go each one, but happy again to go in discussion. There were some people, for example, in the question that we received, Alex and Christina, about why, for example, we are using Scopus usage, which is this column here, for these two, and not for something else. Or, I mean, equally, you can ask the same question here and or here or whatever. We'll get to this question because I think there's a question there, so we will get to the answer to that. There is some thinking behind this, let's say this, but is it a perfect model? I don't think THE can claim that, and if they do, it's for their own account. But I don't think anybody can claim that any model is perfect. There is no such a thing that is called a perfect model. There are many models, you can easily argue about them, but I think what we tried to do differently is when we teamed up with THE to release their ranking, is that we went beyond just one metric. For example, for the World University Rankings, the citation piece, which is 30%, as some of you might know, 30% in weighting, is mostly based on just this metric, the field-weighted citation impact, the so-called citation score. In order to address any potential caveats of this metric or the shortcomings, we decided to have a combination of at least two metrics. That's what you're going to see here. For each of the SDGs, there are at least two columns populated, two cells populated, at least two, to balance, again, the shortcomings of the various metrics or indicators that we are using. I think you guys know this. So the final score is based on the three, as I mentioned, the top 3 plus SDG, which give you the score, all available again on the published website of THE. So I'm just going to go quickly through this. This is my last slide. Really, I'm going to shut up for a moment. Again, we collect feedback. Are we interested in more collaboration and more input and more engagement with you guys? Absolutely, 100%. What is the future? I'm going to tell you actually maybe now about the future. I was thinking whether I should tell it as part of some of questions, because I think there was a good question about what we learned and how the future looks like. Maybe we should, maybe you know what, let me wait to go through that question if you are okay, Alex, because otherwise I'm going to be mixing too much back and forth. But the reality is the queries are great. They are transparent. They are easy to follow. People can, import them. They can use them at any database, not necessarily Scopus only, just to be very frank. Of course, the result might be a bit different, but there are some caveats to that approach. This is why we are adding a machine learning or artificial intelligence approach to address the so-called recall issue, the so-called false negatives, because I think the false positive side is pretty okay. Again, we'll get there, but it's how comprehensive each SDG is represented. That's where we really are hitting some issues there. So again, I'll tell you about the plan that we are having to release the new methodology as of April that does include a machine learning component. Of course, we want to keep improving the queries because they do form the baseline. So again, partnerships to help us improve that. More than happy to continue on that. To give you an idea, one of the things we want to do as a publisher is during manuscript submission by authors, we do want to ask them at that stage whether they can indicate the SDG they believe that they are addressing through that publication, which is not always the case. Sometimes the person has no idea at all. And it's okay, because not every single paper in Scopus does require to be linked to an SDG. But we're trying to leverage our own platforms to get the community really engaged. Again, we might see some localization of these queries. I think the story about being transparent and keep some kind of versioning and history of that and make them available, accessible to the Aurora partners, but others, are more than, again, we continue on that mission and we are not changing our standpoint there. There's a lot of other players in the market, let's say. But at the end of the day, I think, if you ask me, maybe I'm idealistic here, because of the importance of such a topic to society. I believe that the players should work together. Maybe I'm dreaming, but it's one of these things that maybe should challenge at certain points. I think you have a role there, by the way, as institutions to help shape that up a little bit. Yeah, and again, we are using already some of these metrics, social media, shares. Again, I know that the whole notion of indicators versus, the so-called quantitative metrics versus qualitative metrics, the expert review versus indicators, it's a big topic on its own. It's a philosophical discussion. It's happening everywhere in the world. National assessments like the REF in the UK and some other countries are putting that topic big time on the table. But this is basically the position that we're taking, happy to engage and to support and facilitate as much as we can. So, Alex, again, I apologize if I took much more than I thought I would take. I just thought this might just be useful. That's my assumption, of course. But let me stop here and hand over to you.
Thank you very much, M'hamed, for a very comprehensive presentation. You didn't take much more time than what was scheduled, because you touched upon some of the questions that we are going to ask you. So everything will be kind of related, but maybe more or less 65 people hopping in and hopping off, as maybe it's getting late in Australia and early in the United States. That is a sense of the audience. We have a different shape of people in the audience. We have people coming from the CSR or the BenchTech networks with very institutional research backgrounds. We have sustainability managers, officers from the ISCN network. So we have different perspectives, and I think you've done a great job in kind of aligning us all and getting us on board. I'll just reclaim the screen, if I may.
Yeah, let me stop. So I just stopped. Yeah, over to you.
And we'll take the first 10 questions that we prepared beforehand before jumping in the live questions. And M'hamed, let me ask you the first question that you can see hopefully on your screen, which is, how do you view the more and more crowded world of measuring SDG impact and research outputs more generally? Second part of the question, how do you view building on the experiences from universities in this respect?
Thanks, Alex. Just in transparency, obviously, I've seen this question, for example, I did see it before, so there might be some questions that I did not see. So I did prepare some answers to this. Now, as I told you, and I was telling to Christina, when I present, I never have any transcript because I'm really bad at presenting and reading. So I'm going to try to read what I wrote here, but this is basically as an answer to this question. So I think on the first part, just like with many hot topics that are out there, there are always a lot of initiatives emerging, creating indeed this kind of crowded aspect. And SDG is a hot topic. It's just reality. I mean, wherever you go, everybody is talking about SDGs. I think it's something inevitable, and we will have to accept that the world we live in is a bit opportunistic in the sense that we jump on something and we react, and and then later on something maybe comes out of it. It's not necessarily a bad thing, by the way. I don't want to sound negative. I'm just saying it's part of what's always happening. I think I do believe that we have to be careful because also good things come out of these initiatives, even if there are too many players. So as I said, when there are too many players, it's not always a negative thing. So ideally, if you ask me, these initiatives and all this, and I think I touched it a little bit towards the end of my presentation. In an ideal world, all this initiative would be great if they would converge by fostering some collaboration so that we create some sort of a standardized framework to measure societal impact. Because at the end of the day, why are we doing this SDG? At least certainly from the Elsevier perspective, this is not just because we see an opportunity to create business and make money. Seriously, it's just because we all want to measure the impact of research, and Elsevier as a company, it's an important topic because we really genuinely want to contribute to the research community. So in an ideal world, all these initiatives that are taking place, if they could converge, and Elsevier is certainly the first one on the line to say, let's do that. We are absolutely open to that. So if there is something we can do to converge, I think that would be great if we can do that. I mean, another good example, by the way, is the rankings, right? So how many ranking providers are there in the market? A lot of them, right? And maybe people know THNQS and Shanghai ranking, but I don't know what people know, that there are more than 5 dozens of ranking providers. I'm not even talking about the regional ones. Do they all help? Well, I don't know. I mean, everyone is trying obviously to provide themselves a distinctive point. So probably on the SDGs, all these initiatives will try to say, no, we are doing it this way, we are doing it that way. I think if we can converge, it will certainly benefit you, benefit us, benefit the public, and benefit the society. That's my answer to your first part. I don't know what it's political answer, because I'm not really that political. I'm just telling you really my personal view on that. The second part, I think universities are a key stakeholder in this regard. Absolutely. I'm not saying this just to make you guys feel good. It's just reality, because both education and research are very relevant and critical for realizing the mission of the SDGs at the end of the day. I think we, as an information analytics company, but also our role as a publisher, disseminating information and contributing therefore to research that leads to a better impact on society through these SDGs, we have a role to play in supporting these activities. So I would say the following. The typical players in this area are the usual players in the world of research. And that, in my mind, it's not just universities, which I believe are at the heart of this. I acknowledge that, and I actually really believe that. I think universities are at the heart of this because this is where action happens. This is because where education takes place, because where research takes place. But I also think that there is a role for governments because of policy and because of funding. There is a role for us, for vendors like Elsevier, or for information providers, I should say. And there is potentially a role for industry as well, companies, because even on the company side these days, SDGs is also a hot topic in that area as well. I don't know how much you guys know that, but I can tell you through our colleagues who manage IP business, patents, etc., they are approached by companies about exact same topics.
Thank you very much, M'hamed. I'll hand over to Christina for the second question.
Yes, thank you so much for your answer. And then the second question here is, how do you search for a keyword? Do you use only the article title and the keyword paragraph, or the full text? That was the first questions. And then how does this method differ from the method you use to identify research fields in Scopus? So the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is rather a bit easier question or simpler question, in the sense that the first part of the question, I think I answered during the presentation, where I touched on the article title and it's article title, abstract and keywords. These are the fields in what we call an ANI record, an abstract and indexing record. We do not index the full text, as I explained, because if we would do it, of course, we can index our own full text from Elsevier, but then we will not be treating the rest of the journals from other publishers in a fair way. Otherwise, we will then give Elsevier a little bit of an advantage just because we have the full text, and the results, or the page rank algorithms, all that stuff will be benefiting our stuff only. So the full text is not included in this part. Now, it's not the question, but the question is, would it be good if we can index the full text? I think, generally speaking, the body of any article, that's where really the whole story is. Are the abstract and the title and keywords do justice to what a paper is about? I don't think so, to be honest with you. I mean, they do a great deal if you are a good author by putting all the summary in an abstract. But the reality is there is a lot of information in the full text itself. But again, just to say, it's the article title, abstract and keywords where we are searching, and I explained this composite field I was describing earlier. The second part, very quickly, Christina, the second part is how much is it different? I think our approach so far, which was based on the plain keywords, is not that different from any other approach that is, as far as I know, also based on keywords. I don't want to mention the name of the other vendors because I want to speak only about our own stuff. But I know that there are some other players in the field who have been using queries. I think what makes us a bit different now is that we are adding this machine learning component. Again, I'm not going to speak about it because it will come later on, Alex and Christina, so I'll touch base more on that. That's one part, because we are adding a component to address the so-called false negatives or the recall. The precision is not the issue. We have this engagement with universities. Again, it's not unique on its own. Anybody can engage with universities to get feedback. But I think we are also, as a publisher, try to leverage our platforms to get the community engaged by giving us feedback and by telling us, which SDG belong to which paper.
Thank you very much, M'hamed. Next question. It's you wanted to take a break, but actually there are a lot of questions coming up. So
this is a good one.
What are the percentages of false positives and false negatives in your method? And in a way, how can you identify the false positives and the false negatives? And you've touched upon this in your presentation, but maybe can you bring a little more insights into that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is obviously maybe one of the core questions in this question, because when you say we are linking papers to an SDG, anyone can do that, honestly. I mean, anyone can go and say, I believe this paper belongs there. But then, just like with any semantic / natural language processing based approach where you say it's content based. So I think I read this paper and I believe it's about that. It's always the question, if you want to do it at scale, what is the quality of that? And quality is the false positive and the false negatives. The terms that we are using within Elsevier, by the way, are precision and recall. Precision is basically how precise is that set, and recall is how comprehensive is that set. And these two things go together. You put emphasis on the precision, so you want to make the data set as accurate as possible, your recall will go down. You want to improve your recall, there is no other way around that the precision will go a little bit down. So it's always this dilemma. What is the balance that I need to strike to make sure I provide the best quality perspective? Our strategy there is always to go for the accuracy above recall. In other words, if I give to Alex 100 papers and I say all these 100 papers, Alex, are about SDG 1, I want to give him something that touches as high as possible in terms of accuracy, that whenever he finds a paper or two that do not belong there, that's it. But I don't want to tell him, here is a set of paper, and then he just discovered that 50% of those do not belong to poverty, no poverty. Now, the caveat of that is that I might not touch on all the papers that actually should be part of that data set. That's, again, the recall issue. So I'm going to take a bit time on this, Alex and Christina, because this is actually the whole core of this thing. So I'm going to explain what I was discussing about what we have now versus what we want to have. So what we have now is what have been stemming from a couple of years ago. And I remember the very first query that came up together with Aurora did include very broad terms. So, for example, on the one about finance, if I'm not mistaken, we even took the keyword in the search query, a keyword like finance. Now, finance is very broad. It can give you anything. You can get any paper that includes finance, and it could not be necessarily about that SDG. So the very first iteration did result in a lot of papers, which is good from a recall perspective. In other words, you do include a lot. But then when you start digging into each paper, do they belong to the SDG or not? The impact was on precision. In other words, there was too much noise. So the second iteration, we narrowed down a little bit these keywords, meaning we added keywords so that we make sure that we go narrow in the results. And I believe I don't remember this from the top of my mind, this was a couple of years ago, but I remember one of the SDGs went all the way from 100,000 plus results to 17,000 results. You can see that it went to 10th, which improved the precision a lot and addressed the recall. Now, the question, I don't want to go around it and kind of hide without giving the answer. The question was, what is the percentages? Let me tell you about the percentages that we will launch in a couple of months. We are there going to precision above 92%. So in other words, if I give you a set of 100 papers and I say they all belong to SDG X, we have 92 of these papers do belong to X. Now, how do we know for sure? That's the second part of the question. I'll get to it in a minute. And the recall, we made it also get very close to the, well, actually going a bit above the 90% as well. In the current methodology, we have never measured the recall itself because measuring false negatives or the recall is a tough thing. In other words, you are searching for something that you don't know what it is. You are basically saying, I'm missing something, but what is it that I'm missing? Now you can imagine how tough that question is. So how we are, so I gave you some percentages. How are we identifying false positive and false negatives? The false positive is very simple because I give you this set of 100 papers and I say, tell me which ones you believe do not belong there. You know, we put SMEs, so subject matter experts, and we tell us, and also about the feedback, which of these 100 papers do not belong to this SDG. And people will tell you this does not belong, this doesn't belong there. And that's how we know that those are false positives. The false negative, though, is an interesting one. So let me actually look at what we wrote about this. What we have been doing, actually, we are using two methods so far. We're creating a hand-labeled, annotated data set. So we are hiring people, external, actually we spend money on this, with subject matter experts to create a data set of tens of thousands of papers that are saying all these papers belong to this SDG. Now, this helps, by the way, also on the false positive thing, it does. But when we run the queries and the machine learning on top, the machine learning, by the way, I should say, and I apologize, the machine learning, we are using the machine learning to increase the recall, to make sure that everything that was not captured by the query, we can capture it through this machine learning model. But to come back to this question, what we do, when we receive the results from the query and the machine learning model, we check how many papers that are in that hand annotated data set, how many papers are there that were not captured by the query. That tells us which of papers we were missing, and that's the recall piece. Of course, what happens, and this is, again, hopefully everybody's following because this is getting technical, and I don't claim to be a machine learning guru, but the way it works is the moment we identify that there were 5 papers, just as an example, 5 papers that were in that hand-labeled annotated data set that the query nor the machine learning model captured, we will of course go back and tweak the query and tweak the machine model until we capture these 5. But then you say, okay, what about the future? So we go back to the same suppliers and say, update that hand annotated. So, and it's an ongoing going back in circles. So that's one method. The second method is, and it's a bit a crude method, I have to admit, is that we look at journals and we say this journal is really about SDG 5, or this set of journals is really about SDG 5. When we do the query and the machine learning model and we look at papers that are in those journals that were not captured by our query and the model, then we know that we are missing papers. So this is how we measure the false negatives or the recall. And as I mentioned, the false positive is a much more straightforward way because you just simply see checking, is it true or not true? Did I answer this question fairly, guys, or?
Thank you very much. Yes, it is technical and it is not as simple as saying the false positives of one SDGs are the false negative of the other one. Obviously, you've expanded on your method. If I may, would that be a way of the work that you're doing on the SDGs here, creating this new matrix, this new way, this new angle on which you assess research output? Would that be a way of reassessing the field-weighted citation index, for instance, in which clusters of research are defined through journals, to my understanding, and maybe in the future you might use machine learning in reshaping the way and not only for the SDGs, but in reshaping all the lenses through which you look at research. Maybe very briefly, I don't know if the question makes sense.
Well, it makes sense to a certain extent, Alex, as far as I understand it at least. But let me just again re-emphasize something that I said in the beginning. Everything I've been talking about so far is really about classifying content in buckets, right? So you say this is about this is about that, this is about that. That's really a classification exercise. For the metrics, it's a slightly different story, because whether the field-weighted citation impact is the right metrics to use for this or to something else, it's a completely different discussion in my mind. The field-weighted citation impact, and again, to your point, maybe it is not the time, I'm happy to explain this to the algorithm and the equation even itself. The issue there is with the field-weighted citation impact, it's based on papers, not on journals, by the way, it's really on papers. And it normalizes to three parameters, if you like. One is the discipline of the paper. So when you compare the field-weighted citation, when you compare papers, you want to compare the paper that are in medicine with medicine. You don't want to take a paper that is in social sciences with medicine. For example, we know that in social sciences, you don't get a lot of citations. So one citation in social sciences should weigh much heavier than one citation in medicine, as an example. So we look at the discipline the paper belongs to. The other parameter is the lifetime of the paper. A paper that has been there for 5 years is not to be compared with a paper that was published last year. Very simple, because you had more time to get more citations. So it wouldn't make sense. So we take that as well. And the third one is the so-called document type. If your article of your publication, I should say, is of the type review, which we know gets a lot of citations, it's different to compare it with a document type that is called book chapter or conference papers, because you get less citations. So that methodology on its own is for the indicators, the methodology of creating the indicator. What I believe, the point you're making, Alex, which I think is a very good one, is indeed whether when we classify papers, we go beyond static snapshots in terms, we think, oh, that's it, and then we live with it for years, as opposed to engage the community and have this feedback loop by using machine learning stuff, etc., so that we keep improving on data and therefore also improving on the metrics themselves. I hope I kind of touched on this. It's a very big topic. We can have a session on just on that one on its own, to be honest.
And we have a lot of other questions, but thank you for providing an answer. Christina, maybe question number 4, and we have 10 open questions at this stage in the Q&A box. So
I will go very fast through the questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you also for your answer and explaining, because of course this is complicated and it's a complex way of handling these issues. But the second question here is, what is the motivation behind your keyword search? For example, excellence or impact on the society?
Yeah.
And how does it differ from other known methodologies? What are the pros and the cons?
Yeah, but we said some things around already that touch on this question, so I'll try to keep it concise. Is it excellence or is it impact on society? I think if you listen to my pitch or my story earlier, I would say probably both, just if I want to give a political answer. But if you push me to put emphasis on one of the two, I would say it's much more on the proxy, or let's say the proxy element, to try to help address that issue of measuring a societal impact or impact on society. I think the way that the SDGs today are positioned, I mean, just watch the THE title of the ranking. It's called Impact and Innovation Ranking, right? So they are already positioned under the impact much more than under excellence, but I don't want to rule out the excellence on its own. How much is it different? I think we already answered that question. I already said if it's query-based, it's not different. What is different in my view is that we are adding this machine learning model now. We're engaging our own platforms like the manuscript submission and asking researchers to engage with us. We have this RELX website where we're engaging with the public right there. And we have these partnerships, which I hope we can expand even further. Pros and cons, query-based, I think the query, the keyword search, the pros of it is it transparent. Everybody can reproduce. You know, the notion of reproducibility is a big notion. Everybody's talking about it. Everything has to be reproducible, etc. So I think that's a good thing. Everybody can go and use them. They are database agnostic. They are tool agnostic. You can do whatever. So I think that's all great. The cons, as I mentioned, they do address precision. So they can give you good precision because you can tweak the queries and narrow them down so that the data that you get from the database following searches there is very much to the accuracy, to the precision, but they do not necessarily address the recall, which is how much data you are still missing. Because again, keywords, unless you know every single word that's out there to put in the query, you will not be able to address the recall itself. That would be my concise answer, if you like.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that was a good answer. I think we should continue to the next question. Thank you, yep. Alexander.
Question. Before we jump into question number 5, M'hamed, I just wanted to convey one comment that we had on the chat, basically from the University of Sharjah, basically saying thank you for your very nice presentation when you finished your presentation. So I just wanted to convey this message to you so that we don't forget. Also positive congratulations and feedbacks from the audience. Question number 5, what have you learned from the methodology developed by the Aurora University Network? You presented the Aurora Network in your presentation, but particularly concerning the combinations of keywords, and what are your plans for further developments of SciVal? Very precise question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So again, I'll try to keep it short. I think we learned, honestly, I think we are grateful to the Aurora University Network, particularly the fee talking with them. So we learned a lot from them. When I was presenting, I did say that the very first iteration, so the things we learned is that you have to be careful with the queries, because if you try to put as many words and you do not necessarily scrutinize the words and you throw there too generic words, you do get a lot of papers, but then when you dive into these papers, you just, you discover how much they do not necessarily touch the specific SDGs. For example, the first time we did a check, it was before even any launch on THE impact ranking back in 2019. We discovered that the precision was as low as 80%. So we were like, for every 100 papers, 20 were not necessarily touching on that SDG. I think the other thing we learned is that you can do this on your own, but if you really want to be successful, is engage the community itself. That's another big lesson. And I'm glad that THE, I should be also give them credits, that got us in touch with the Aurora network itself. The combination again of the keywords, it's just because when you do a search, it's not a simple search. It has to be this very exhaustive search, and these searches are not that advanced. So we don't have this so-called proximity searches, etc. They are pretty much easy to follow or easy for people to deal with. So that's another learning lesson. If you ask, I mean, I would say if I would summarize this into one word, which I wrote it in my own paper here on board, I think with queries, we can be quite precise in linking documents to SDGs. However, we might not be able to link all documents. I think that's one of the major lessons learned, technically speaking. Second part of the question, what are our plans to do to develop our new developments on SciVal on this topic? Already said that we have done the following. We have improved the queries already. If you go to our website, the Relax website I showed, you can see that an announcement that we are making where we have included what we call fragments of the queries. So there were typically 10 fragments in a query, and fragment is these words, and then you get an or, and then a couple of words and an or. So this is a fragment. We had tens of fragments. Now we have hundreds of fragments for each of queries. So the queries are getting quite advanced now. So this first thing we are doing new for SciVal and for THE, by the way, because it's consistent. What you see in SciVal, it's what you see THE and vice versa. And the second piece is that machine learning component, where we are using these trained data sets to help us identify other papers that we are not identifying. The last thing I want to say about this is that we were able to find 10% more papers across all this. So this is on average, because it differs per SDG, but on average, we find 10% more papers than with the machine learning model. In other words, if I give you 100 with queries, now I'm able to give you 110 papers based on query and the machine learning model. That's why we call it a machine learning query-based, a machine learning augmented query-based approach.
Thank you, M'hamed. We have 15 minutes left before the end of this session, so let us run. Christina?
Yes, and here we have another question. Can you explain why you use different multipliers and different methodologies for the different SDGs? What is the thinking behind using the number of reads for some SDGs without taking into account how long ago the paper was published? I think you have also highlighted this before.
Yeah,
so
there isn't much to say, maybe just a couple of words. I think I already said that there is a thinking behind each of those. Some, for example, we include the proportion of female on the gender inequality for a reason. When we include, for example, the number of reads, it's typically because we believe that discipline or that SDG itself is not well served by citation. So we are looking to alternative. I think most of you know that the so-called usage indicators or the read indicators like downloads, views, reads, bookmark, shares, etc., are called leading indicators, and citations are called lagging indicators. So whether the paper old or not, we are using them in a relative context. So we are not comparing this indicator that is based on this on usage versus another indicator. It's within the comparison within that SDG itself. That would be my answer. There is much to say here, by the way, so I apologize to whoever asked this question, but I'm happy to follow up in more details about this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Then we take the next question. Why don't you measure research according to the SDG number 17, partnership for the goals?
Well, because I think SDG 17 says, collaboration between organizations to reach, to achieve anything on the SDGs. What would be the query? What would be the research on that? So we have, it's a difficult one. If someone has ideas about how to do this, again, by all means, we'll be more than happy, because we struggled. We struggled to come up with a query on SDGs itself, and we ultimately determined that we will have to look at the co-authored papers as the best way to do this.
It's because we think this is also a very important goals, because it's obligatory or mandatory when you are taking part in the ranking. And we also had some information when we talked with the Aurora network that they are trying to see how you can measure according to that goal. So maybe that could be an area to develop.
Yeah, more than happy. Right now, we only do, by the way, this north-south thing, low income collaboration. So we look at institutions from the, let's say, rich countries with poor countries and see how they work together. That's the best thing we could come up. Again, more than happy to listen to people to how they can guide us on this.
Thank you.
A broad topic. Question number 8, what happens to the papers that are manually uploaded that were not captured by the keyword search? As anybody can do this, will there be any feedback available?
Yeah, so feedback is available. I think I mentioned a couple of times, so even a link. And the way we are using it actually is to indeed create this training data set, as I mentioned, because they are not that part of the query. So we use it for that machine learning model to, it's basically this handcrafted data set. Every feedback is handcrafted data set, which we use for the machine learning model to search in addition to the queries to find wherever the queries were not able to find. Very, very useful, very critical to success actually of this exercise.
Thank you very much. Question number 9, Christina, maybe? You muted.
Yes. And then we have, I think, the last question. Do you have any formalized cooperation models with your university networks to co-develop methodologies and to share data? Are you interested in more cooperation concerning these topics?
Yeah, so again, I already answered the second part. More than happy, we are interested. So if there is any follow-up and you, Christina and Alex can kind of mediate or broker or facilitate, more than happy, or directly, whatever. But the answer is absolutely yes. Do we have a formal cooperation model? The honest answer, no. It's not that we don't want to. It's just that we have a paper signed with the 3 universities that I shared with you earlier. Again, FIU, Auckland in New Zealand, and Denmark. So we have a paper there. We have a collaboration formalized, let's say, collaboration agreement with anybody who wants to. So we could potentially use that. But again, I guess that to me are just mechanics. The more important piece is really whether institutions are really interested to collaborate with us, and then we can always come up with some formal model if you want to.
Thank you, M'hamed. And then we'll jump onto the Q&A platform, and I'll take the questions as they appear and as per the number of votes they collected. So first question from Malcolm. Have you considered including tick boxes for the specific SDGs in Elsevier's journal article submission platforms?
Good question, because again, I mentioned in one of the slides, maybe I was so fast that people didn't catch it. So thanks for people to remind me on that. So the point there is exactly what I said. We are considering in our Elsevier journal article submission, so when you submit a manuscript, that we will indeed give you this list and you will check a box to say, yeah, this paper is about SDG XYZ. So the answer is yes, we are considering that. And we might launch something soon, I hope.
Thank you. Christina, would you like to take the second question?
Yes, does Scopus also consider publication in language other than English for the analysis?
Yeah, so this could be a lengthy answer. I'm going to try to keep it short. So the Scopus has a formal policy of including content, including journals. It follows the so-called CSAB, the Content Selection Advisory Board. In other words, we have an international board of prominent professors who decide which journal go to Scopus. The local journal is not a requirement as long as there is an English abstract, an English title, etc. So there is a formal process of including that. I can tell you that we have a lot of local content in Scopus. Is it in balance with English? No, that's the reality, because I think the percentage doesn't go even beyond 10 or 15%. But there is a process to include that, provided that the substance of research, that this local content is actually at the level that Scopus and the CSAB, that in the independent board, are aspiring.
Interesting. Thank you. A question from Janet. Thanks for the presentation. One question: does your system allow to capture specific projects that are of interdisciplinary or even transdisciplinary character, as these type of projects are crucial in order to do research on SDG repertoire?
This is a great question. This is touching on one of the challenges indeed about this interdisciplinary research. And when you put these things, I mean, all the talk I was talking about specific SDGs, where do you put that research? I think in what we are trying to do is to always push towards a specific SDG, but a paper can appear in multiple SDGs. It's how do we identify this let's say multi-sci or multi-science papers. Whoever asked this, who asked that question, I would love to follow up with ideas. I think Alex and Christina, this would be a fantastic topic for a collaboration, because it's indeed, I agree. You bring in people with different skill sets, you have a better chance to address these issues. And how do you then give them credits for that work by not putting them in a specific SDG is a critical point. I don't have a silver bullet on this. There are some ideas, but I would love to engage with institutions to understand how we can do this collectively.
Thank you, M'hamed. We have maybe 2-3 more minutes to go, so maybe we can take 2 or 3 more questions, and we'll wrap up. We'll send you maybe more questions after this event, M'hamed. If we haven't had the time to answer all the questions, then maybe there will be more questions
by mail or whatever. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Christina. Would you like to take the question from Francisco?
I will take that one. How good is your system in capture and practice or application oriented publication from, let's say, universities of applied science that work closely with industry partners as part of research and technique?
I think probably teaching, maybe.
Teaching, sorry, I didn't see teaching.
No, maybe the A was as a typo there. I think It's a good question. The simple answer is this. We use Scopus, as I mentioned. Scopus is a journal-based database, and all the document types that are in a journal, we cover them. So if these application-oriented publications, they have a specific type that is not covered today by Scopus, we'll be interested for my Scopus colleagues to actually have a discussion about this, so that we, again, if they add to the research, we'll certainly include them. If they are not published as part of books or trade journals or conferences, well, that's where we have had some discussions, because then it's probably not within the scope of Scopus. But if I understand the question, I hope I do. But.
Thank you. Paula asked if the slides can be available on our side. It will be the case on your side. M'hamed, you've said yes, if I understood correctly.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. And maybe I'll take just the last question from Malcolm again. It sounds, it's a question about culture. It sounds as if a lot of problems would be solved if authors would take a greater care in writing their abstracts and selecting the keywords. Do you have any suggestions of how this culture change could be accomplished? So it's again a great question, but a big question here.
Well, again, it's a huge topic on its own, and I would say if I knew the answer there, I'll probably start my own business and and make a lot of money on this. It boils down to discipline. I agree with the question, because ultimately, I mean, let me just say this. Even for authors to write their affiliation properly, it's a big ask these days. I mean, I don't want to be, pushing researchers or authors in a bad light, but I think our approach from Elsevier perspective is to not ask people to fill in information, but to allow them to select. So basically make their life as easy as possible, and therefore can automate and use technology to the degree we can. So instead of saying, well, Alex, tell me which SDG, well, we give you the list and you select the one, which is potentially easier than when you have to type, because everybody gets easily bored with forms, etc. So, it's a long topic, as you said, and there are things that technology will help us do. There are things that we could come up with some kind of governance model. There's a role for institutions, for research office, for governments, for policies, etc., etc.
Thank you, M'hamed. I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to finish all the questions. So I suggest to the audience that we'll take the remaining questions and collect them and address them to M'hamed. And I think the whole purpose of today's meeting is to act as a bridge also between universities and information providers like Elsevier. Thank you very much, M'hamed. I'll let Christina wrap up and conclude.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you so very, very, very much, M'hamed. It was a great presentation, and all the answers that you are giving us. It's a lot of engagement, and I can hear that. I also would like to thank all the people at the meeting and all the interesting questions that we had in the QA. And we will, as Alexander described, come back to you and also have answer on that questions. I think ISCN as a network would like to continue to invite you to further collaboration with universities, with Elsevier, and also other networks like CISAR to share experience for how we can develop these topics. It's of course very important, and we have always worked with how research and the social impact, how can we measure that? And now we have the challenge also to look at the UN SDGs that is in focus. And I think that in some way help us to continue this work. It will always be a process of improvements, of course. We are also having a conference in the beginning of June, the ISCN conference, and we are in the planning process, and we are discussing different kinds of topics concerning this, what we would like to discuss and highlight on the conference. And we also have some example of topics like the most important thing also, of course, how can we benchmarking this issue? How can we as universities contribute to this process? What kind of partnership do we need to develop? We have these goals 17 at the UN SDGs, and it's a lot about how we would like to work together. And I also heard that you was highlighting that, M'hamed, several times, about how we should collaborate and how we can improve the things together. We also have started in our working group a project concerning how we can collect and sharing data among the universities. It's not only about the ranking issues, of course. We have learned that during last year and also in the beginning of this year that we need to broaden the perspective. It's all about how we can, of course, benchmarking and how we can work together hand in hand in this issue. And then also we, of course, need to dig deeper and discuss really the methodology concerns and how we can be transparent concerning this. So I think we should close this event and this meeting now. If you don't have any more questions, that is very important to raise. I would like also, if you would add something, Alexander.
Obviously, a big thank you to M'hamed for his time, for his insights, for his critical spirit. Thank you to the audience for being with us today. We thought that with 90 minutes, that would be enough. And actually, maybe we should have booked 4 hours, but this is it. I mean, I think
I'm the one to blame there, I'm afraid, Alex. I'm the one to blame.
No, but I mean, there were so many interesting things to say. So thank you again for the exchange. We've all learned a lot of things, and we'll follow up with you, M'hamed, in the near future. Thank you again.
Yes,
Thanks,
and then I just would like to add, Alfredo, can you put on the camera? Because, you know, we are also so happy that we have support to arrange this meeting. So thank you, Alfredo.
You're very welcome. It was very interesting, and we look forward to supporting this really interesting initiatives that you have. So please feel free to just come to us whenever you have anything else interesting to show our membership as well. And we look forward to this ISCN conference. We're really looking forward to that. So thank you for putting this all together as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care and see you soon. Bye. Bye.